Welcome back, little bookworms. Let's read The Adventures of Captain Underpants with all new Dogman comic, written by Dave Pilkey. Chapter 1, George and Harold. Meet George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. Flower shop, pick your own roses. George and Harold were best friends. They had a lot in common. They lived right next door to each other, and they were both in the same fourth grade class at Jerome Horowitz Elementary School. George and Harold were usually responsible kids. Whenever anything bad happened, George and Harold were usually responsible. Flower shop, pick our noses. But don't get the wrong idea about these two. George and Harold were actually very nice boys. No matter what everybody else thought, they were good, sweet, and lovable. Well, okay, maybe they weren't so sweet and lovable, but they were good nonetheless. It's just that George and Harold each had a silly streak a mile long. Usually, that silly streak was hard to control. Sometimes it got them into trouble, and once it got them into big, big trouble. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2, Treehouse Comics Inc. After a hard day of cracking jokes, pulling pranks, and causing mayhem at school, George and Harold liked to rush to the old treehouse in George's backyard. Inside the treehouse were two big old fluffy chairs, a table, a cupboard crammed with junk food, and a padlocked crate filled with pencils, pens, and stacks of paper. Now Harold loved to draw, and George loved to make up stories, and together the two boys spent hours and hours writing and drawing their very own comic books. Over the years, they had created hundreds of their own comics, starring dozens of their own superheroes. First, there was Dogman, then came Timmy the Talking Toilet, and who could forget the amazing Cow Lady? But the all-time greatest superhero they ever made up had to be the amazing Captain Underpants. George came up with the idea. Most superheroes look like they're flying around in their underwear, he said. Well, this guy actually is flying around in his underwear. The two boys laughed and laughed. Yeah, said Harold. He could fight with wedgie power. George and Harold spent entire afternoons writing and drawing the comic adventures of Captain Underpants. He was their coolest superhero ever. Luckily for the boys, the secretary at Jerome Horowitz Elementary School was much too busy to keep an eye on the copy machine. So whenever they got a chance, George and Harold would sneak into the office and run off several hundred copies of their latest Captain Underpants adventure. After school, they sold their homemade comics on the playground for 50 cents each. Chapter 3, The Adventures of Captain Underpants, written by George Beard, cartoons by Harold Hutchins. The Really Cool Adventures of Captain Underpants, written by George Beard, drawn by Harold Hutchins. It was a time of darkness and despair for planet Earth. Bad guys had taken over the streets, and all the superheroes in the world were too old to fight evil. Hey! Haha. Then came along a new, improved, extra-strength superhero. Tra-la-la! Look in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's an egg salad sandwich. No way, I'm Captain Underpants. Captain Underpants was faster than a speeding waistband. Zoom! More powerful than boxer shorts. and able to leap tall buildings without getting a wedgie. Tra-la-la! Night and day, Captain Underpants watched over the city, fighting for truth, justice, and all that is pre-shrunk and cottony. Meanwhile, at a nearby elementary school, it was Stinky Taco Surprise Day at the cafeteria. Yuck. Everybody hated it so much they all threw it away. Soon, the cafeteria food came to life. I am the inedible hunk. The monster ran around the school eating everything in sight. Munch! Help! The inedible hunk just ate up 15 folding chairs and the gym teacher. Oh no, not folding chairs. This looks like a job for Cha-la-la, Captain Underpants. Captain Underpants shot lots of underwear at the monster, but it didn't do any good. Zip, munch, munch. So Captain Underpants took off running. The inedible hunk chased him. Grrr, help! And chased him, and chased him. Finally, the inedible hunk got too tired and thirsty to chase Captain Underpants. How about a nice drink of water? So the monster took a long drink from a white shiny bowl. Gulp, gulp. When suddenly, flush. Hooray for Captain Underpants! And so the inedible hunk got flushed away and was never heard from again. Tra-la-la! Don't miss our next existing adventure, Captain Underpants and the Attack of the Talking Toilets, coming soon to a playground near you. Chapter 4, Mean Old Mr. Krupp. Do you see that old guy looking out the window up there? That's Mr. Krupp, the principal. Now, Mr. Krupp was the meanest, sourest old principal in the whole history of Jerome Horwitz Elementary School. He hated laughter and singing. He hated the sounds of children playing at recess. In fact, he hated children altogether. And guess which two children Mr. Krupp hated most of all? If you guessed George and Harold, you're right. Mr. Krupp hated George and Harold. He hated their pranks and their wisecracks. He hated their silly attitudes and their constant giggling. And he especially hated those awful Captain Underpants comic books. I'm going to get those boys one day, Mr. Krupp vowed. One day, very, very soon. Chapter 5, One Day, Very, Very Soon. Remember when I said that George and Harold's silly streak got them into big trouble once? Well, this is the story of how that happened, and how some huge pranks and a little blackmail turned their principal into the coolest superhero of all time. It was the day of the big football game between the Horwitz Knuckleheads and the Stubbornville Stinkbugs. The bleachers were filled with fans. Jerome Horwitz Elementary. See our big football game today. The cheerleaders ran into the field and shook their pom-poms all over their heads. A fine black dust drifted over their pom-poms and settled all around them. "Gimme a K!" shouted the cheerleaders. "K!" repeated the fans. "Gimme an N!" shouted the cheerleaders. "N!" repeated the fans. "Gimme an achoo!" sneezed the cheerleaders. Achoo! repeated the fans. The cheerleaders sneezed and sneezed and sneezed some more. They couldn't stop sneezing. "Hey!" shouted a fan in the bleachers. "Somebody sprinkled black pepper into the cheerleaders' pom-poms." "I wonder who did that?" asked another fan.